Thank you very much. I'm very glad and very delighted to have this opportunity to organize this panel with really excellent panelists. Thank you very much for taking the time and to come. So just once again, maybe to make a quick introduction. On my left, you have Hubert de Vauplane, who is a partner at Kramer and Levin. And you have Nathalie Linhart from legal counsel from Consensys. So I will give you some word to just to introduce yourself, and then we're going to come to the subjects. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Mané. Thank you for inviting me to attend to this panel. I am a lawyer. I am sorry about that. I am a former banker. I am sorry again. I am a former trader. I'm sorry too. I am professor to the Paris Law University too. I have a long experience in various international banks. And I am involved on crypto since now 9 years, when I joined Kramer Levin Paris office 10 years ago. And this is good to discuss on the subject, because it is clearly, for me, it is something to see as it was the capital market 25 or 30 years ago, i.e. we discover everything. Everything is new, and we have to do something. And sorry, because I am quite maybe the oldest guy in the room. But
no, it's me.
But clearly, it is interesting for lawyers and people, because it is like 25 years ago when the swap market, the capital market was growing.
Okay, thank you very much. Nathalie?
Yeah, great. Thanks for having me. I'm very happy to be here, and great to see so many of you here. Although I do have to wonder who's here to learn about regulation, and we're just waiting for Joe to speak after us. But anyway, so yeah, I'm legal counsel at Consensys, focusing on everything from product policy and also regulatory landscape in Europe and the US as well.
Thank you very much. And I think that the most important things, you have like 3 legal persons here, so we really need to start with a disclaimer, of course. So whatever, I know, because I say this because I know there's going to be a lot of questions. I already see Alex here. He's the guy who's like having like almost like 15 set of 15 questions already. It's like difficult to be his general counsel sometimes. But yeah, so given that it's it's just legal talk, so we are trying to express our opinions on certain amount of things regarding staking specifically. So whatever we said here, it's just our opinions, and it will not engage Kiln, Consensys, or Kramer or Levin. So thank you very much for your understanding on that. So before I actually start, I think with the real discussions about staking and regulatory landscape, I think that it's most important thing actually to distinguish what staking is, and to differentiate staking from other products like DeFi and CX earn products. So this is the most important thing, and probably all discussion will be oriented towards some of the conclusions about what staking is. So what we're trying to accomplish, and what we're trying to make people understand, that the staking providers are providing a technology, an IT system that permits validators to validate transactions on the blockchain, that it permits actually to have a certain security of this validation, and in exchange of this they will get these rewards, which is absolutely different from other products, for example DeFi products, where you don't have transparency. Also with CX earn products, which is completely different. They're more focused on trading. You have users who is actually transferring the ownership of the digital assets towards different platforms and different companies. So basically this is the main problems. You have CX earn products that are pretty much a mixture between staking and DeFi products. So what we're trying to accomplish is really to express what staking, to define what staking actually is, and to have a global opinion, regulatory opinion, and the global opinion about staking geographically, of course. So that's why actually I wanted to have Hubert here, who is French qualified lawyer, and he's going to speak about Europe, and Nathalie, who will touch the subjects regarding the US and the UK. So basically I would like really to start with Europe and France. So I understand actually that you have been in Rome recently, where you negotiate the guidelines for UNIDRA, and there is a lot of interesting questions about staking. The notion of undivided pool, which is pretty interesting. I read it. It's the first time actually that I see some reference, a European reference on the staking. Can you give us a little bit more information about that?
Yeah, maybe on the top of that, UNIDROIT is an international organization. It's more or less like it's an organization to prepare and to propose international convention on specific aspects. The last one in the capital market was focusing on securities. It was 15 years ago with the Hague Convention at The Hague. The Hague Convention is more focusing on conflict of laws, when UNIDROIT is focusing on substantial laws, i.e. proprietary laws, to be short. And UNIDROIT, at the demand of some member states, have started working 2 years ago, maybe 3 years ago, for our international principle guidelines for what is our digital assets. And during the discussion, part of the discussion was focusing on, okay, first of all, we have to discuss on staking, on DeFi, and most of the reference was coming from the US for a lot of reasons, because you maybe know or you maybe don't know that at the same period of time, the US Uniform Commercial Code, the so-called UCC, has been revised last year in January to introduce in Article 12 a new definition of control. And the definition of control has a lot of direct impact to qualify what is a digital asset, and specifically for the staking. And this is where we have, the US have introduced in their new regulations, the new UCC, this concept of control for digital assets, with an interesting link with how we test, we will come back after, where we have the undivided pool concept, if I may. And the idea here is to discuss at UNIDROIT how we can harmonize the vision of a staking and globally speaking on digital assets to see whether or not a digital asset is controlled by someone, and then if someone controls a digital asset, then there is a lot of consequences as the ownership and the transfer and so on and so on. And you're right, it is the first time that we have seen in our official paper concerning digital assets the notion of undivided pool, and with a lot of discussion about staking at the UNIDROIT. Now, to be short, because I am a lawyer, I can speak a lot. So interrupt me. But people who are working in UNIDROIT are mostly academics, US and UK academics mainly, and the reference is from the US mainly.
So basically it's a harmonization of the different legislations. It's like, is there any conclusions that we...
It is more an harmonization, it is guidelines that then the next step when the principle will be approved by the board of UNIDROIT, each country can introduce those principles into their jurisdiction.
Is this just a recommendation, or it's like having a specific legal force for the others?
No legal force, recommendation.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, great, thank you. Thank you very much, Hubert. So let's travel a little bit in the UK. So basically, I think that the collapse and the Black November was extremely worried everybody after FTX, and I see that a lot of movements since I think January 2023, where there is a new financial regimes. So what's happening in the UK, Nathalie?
Yeah, so the UK government has published a consultation in February on the future regulatory framework, and it primarily concerns CeFi. So it's basically seeking to create a similar framework like MiCA. So it would cover centralized exchanges, issuance of cryptos, issuance of stablecoins, custody, management of crypto assets. So it primarily focuses on CeFi, but there is also a section on DeFi. But the government is at the moment taking like a phased approach, so focusing on CeFi first, because this is where they identified that they are the biggest risks, like we've seen centralized products last year. And on DeFi, at the moment they are just collecting evidence, seeking industry feedback, and then later on they might sort of propose some rules.
When do you expect? So we should have like very firm regulation like we have in Europe. Do you expect to have something like this, or?
Yeah, so on the CeFi part, the consultation, sort of the final rules will be published in the coming years. It's not anything immediate. On DeFi, they're just collecting industry feedback, but there's also a section on staking, which to my mind is the first time that there is a consultation on staking specifically. There are a few questions that I think we as an industry should really respond to. One of them is around sort of what staking models would qualify as a collective investment scheme. So this is quite concerning that they're already thinking about some staking models being an investment scheme. This is a term used for TradFi investment managers. So
basically, if I understand well, they are progressing in the same path with staking with the other type of products, correct?
Yeah, it's a progressive sort of.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, this is very
Then another question on staking in the consultation, they're asking whether we should distinguish between lending, staking, and provide liquidity, which to me is quite concerning to ask the question because it's clear that these are very different products. So again, there's some opportunity for us as an industry to educate the government. And to that end, so the consultation is still open. It closes on the 30th of April. So I would encourage everyone to respond to that, if only, even if you respond just to the question on staking, it's still available for the government. And yeah, before we move to the US, I just wanted to pause for a second just to appreciate the fact that there is actually an open, transparent consultation. Industry can express their views and the government will then analyze it, take it into account. So we should be grateful that we had this opportunity.
Yeah, I mean,
to
this is pretty different from what's going on in the US, which is very, very positive. So, speaking about the US, I think this is, I mean, the main subject today. And what happened with Kraken really, disturbed a lot of people, especially, of course, staking providers. So just to give you a little bit of insights of that, so you probably know that in February this year, Kraken decided to settle with SEC. You know probably well that in the US you have a situation when you have regulation power enforcement. Of course, this is not the tribunal decision. It's just the Kraken decided to settle because SEC considered that staking offer developed by Kraken is considered as a security. So basically what's happened is that they simply qualify this as a security based on the Howey test. So what I would like to know, and probably if you can explain us how the SEC is functioning actually in the US, and I think that probably they didn't pass the Howey test. So can you please tell us more about Howey test, why they didn't pass? And what are the main like principal points that you can eventually bring forward?
Yeah, sure. So a bit about the SEC, so the Securities and Exchange Commission, it's a U.S. federal government agency. They oversee TradFi players like exchanges, broker-dealers, and in recent years they've also claimed jurisdiction over various parts of crypto. Now, like you said, they've chosen the path of targeted enforcement actions instead of publishing clear guidelines for crypto companies. And like often people ask, like, why is that? Why don't they just publish guidelines like the UK is trying to do? And the reason is that it's just easier. They don't have to go through the whole legislative process where their proposals might be challenged. And especially where in situations where the SEC is trying to expand the scope of its jurisdiction to cover crypto. So there could be a lot of challenges, so that's why they are choosing just to go after targeted players. Yeah,
maybe just one thing is that maybe we forgot, it's that the fact that the consequence of this decision or this settlement is that Kraken completely discontinued its staking offer in the US. So what does it mean actually for the clients in the US?
So for Kraken's clients, their stake assets were returned, except for ETH, which remains staked until withdrawals are enabled. Otherwise, in terms of like impact on other staking offerings, I would expect that to the extent that there are some very similar offerings in the US, then they might want to make some changes. But I would also say that every settlement or every enforcement action is tied to the specifics of the case. So it doesn't set the law, it doesn't set precedents. Ultimately, the law is decided by the courts. And in this case, Kraken decided to settle, probably because it made sense from a business perspective, and also I think because here sort of the case was less clear-cut. It was, I think, in general, the SEC tries to go after easy targets, low-hanging fruits, where the action is quite easily justified, and Kraken was one of them. But I do think that if the SEC chose to go after sort of more controversial targets, then the industry would probably unite and challenge the SEC in court, because, like I said, ultimately the courts decide the law. And I think one example where this could happen is if the SEC goes after base layer staking or solo staking, where you stake directly, not through a provider, because that would really be a fundamental expansion of the concept of securities, and there I think the industry would really challenge the action in court. I would also say that the SEC and the chair, in particular Gary Gensler, probably I've heard him saying that crypto companies should just come in and register as if it was an easy thing to do.
But yeah, exactly. One of the questions that I have, it's, I mean, why should we, if this is the problem, why we should just register? No, where is the problem? So why they don't register? I heard somewhere actually that it's the part of their business strategy to settle more than to get registered. So why they don't register just? So what is the problem?
Yeah, so the Securities Act, which is the main part of the securities law, it's from 1933. So obviously then envisage the new products like staking programs. And so players in the industry actually aren't sure how to register, even with the best lawyers, they're actually not sure. For example, Coinbase said that even though they have all the means to go through the honors process, they're still not sure what to register as or what exactly to do. So that's one thing. And also, one of the SEC commissioners, Hester Pierce, she published a dissenting opinion in the Kraken's case. She said that in the current climate, crypto-related offerings aren't making it through the registration pipeline. So it even comes from within the SEC, sort of the acknowledgement that even if someone was a good faith actor and wanted to register, then even in that case, they probably wouldn't succeed.
Okay, thank you, Nathalie. Hubert, let's come back to Europe and make some kind of a comparison between the US and Europe. So, do we have how we test in Europe? How we are actually? Of course, we don't have regulation for enforcement. This is for sure, and this is, I think, an advantage that we have in Europe. But how we are functioning in Europe? What is the main difference? We don't have how we test. Do we have the similar type of regulation? What are the main differences in terms of in these processes?
The main difference is as in the US, they are targeting staking and other people to come, if I may, to the securities law and regulation. In the EU, this is not the case. The question is about the definition of digital assets. Whether or not an activity should be or will be considered or qualified as a digital asset in the sense of today's French law and tomorrow on the future MiCA regulation. I.e., we don't have the same debate. The debate in the US is whether or not a product or an activity should be, will be considered as a security. Here, clearly, this is not a security. This is not a security in the EU, in France, I suppose in the UK too. Potentially, it is a digital asset, and potentially, it is a service which must be regulated by digital asset service providers, the future CASP, a crypto asset service provider. And the question today is whether or not the future EU regulation will cover DeFi, clearly not, and staking, unclear, because it has been drafted before the growth of staking, if I may. And it is the same for France. The French regulator, the IMF, has issued a few weeks ago, maybe 2 months ago now, a questionnaire to some people, maybe to you too, to discuss on DeFi, not on staking, but more specifically to question on the DeFi. This is not an open debate as in the UK, because there is no target today to do something in the French law and regulation, but clearly some people are thinking about the possibility to regulate staking in France before to regulate in the EU if the MiCA is clearly too far in terms of covering the staking in the next months. Because again, the MiCA, which is supposed to enter into force now in a few months, because the official vote will be soon, but then it will be 2024, 2025, depending on the aspect of the MiCA. Clearly, it doesn't cover DeFi. Not sure it covers staking. In such case, some local regulators or local jurisdiction, as France, will potentially prepare something.
And actually, how you see how the staking could actually be challenged by regulatory framework in Europe?
Considering it is a digital asset service activity.
Okay.
Not a security, but this is a digital assets first, and digital asset service activity, which is supposed to be regulated.
Okay.
And this is why it is important to see on a case-by-case basis with our chart flows who is doing what, who is transferring what, to see, okay, who is providing a service potentially. If it is a pure peer-to-peer or pure technology aspect, there is no service, no regulated activity. And this is why the process is quite long and unclear at the end of the day, because we don't have any guidelines or something special. Mm-hmm. Having the document published from the UK will clearly help us, even though it is from the UK, because it will develop and analyze in the UK law, but in the EU sense, because the UK is closer to the EU than the US, if I may, on this sense. Absolutely. Having this document will clearly help people to see whether or not this is a digital asset service activity.
Okay, thank you, Hubert. Just maybe back to the basics from the beginning. So, when I explain what staking actually is and trying actually to figure out how different staking providers could actually be defined and qualified in the US specifically. Because when you read the complaint from SEC, when you can practically realistically actually realize that it's not all staking that is actually security. So, okay, we scrutinize what's going on in the US. We're gonna we spend a lot of time with our lawyers to understand and get a lot of things, a lot of legal opinions to ensure our customers, but. What I actually seen in Kraken settlement is that it's not all staking that is considered as security. It's more likely they are attacking how they design actually their staking offer. So I would like actually to find out to specify this difference between, okay, this is Kraken, this is why they have settled like this, and what about other staking providers? What kind of research they need to make, and what kind of legal opinions they need to have in order to demonstrate what they're actually doing. So can you tell us a little bit more about that? I have a good understanding about that?
Yeah, sure. That's absolutely right. So the Kraken's offering had some certain design features that, like I said, made it an easy target. And actually the SEC in its ruling, they distinguished clearly from solo staking. For example, in the way that as a solo staker, you receive all the rewards generated by the protocol automatically, whereas in Kraken's case, they sort of played with the rewards before sending them to the customer. So at least we have some guidance in the ruling that solo staking, the SEC sees it as different. But maybe going back to the Howey test and to sort of show how the SEC concluded that the Kraken's offering was a security. So the Howey test is a test that's used to determine whether something is an investment contract in the US, and there are 4 limbs, and all of them have to be satisfied in order for something to qualify as a security. So the test is there an investment of money in a common enterprise with the expectation of profit derived from the efforts of others? So the first limb, investment of money. So in the Kraken's case, basically, in general, the courts for this test, they are looking whether the customer has put their assets at financial risk. So in Kraken's case, it was about custody mainly, and the fact that according to their terms and conditions, the ownership over the assets passed to Kraken, so customers lost ownership of their assets. And what this means for the financial risk is that customers essentially took an exposure against the platform, against Kraken, rather than against the protocol. So that's why they basically took a counterparty risk against the platform. So that's for the first prong. The second one, common enterprise, this was about pooling. So Kraken pooled customers' assets together, but also they then commingled the customer's assets with their own proprietary assets. And this was a problem because what the Kurds are looking at for this common enterprise test is whether the fortunes of the investor and the scheme promoter, whether they are tied together, whether they fluctuate in the same way together. And here clearly if you commingle your own asset with the customer's assets, then that's satisfied. The third limb about expectation of profits, that was about marketing. So the way that Kraken talked about their program was in terms of like, you will get this yield. They made it sound as if it was like an investment, like a bond, instead of emphasizing that staking is a data validation mechanism, a computer science thing, essentially. So because of the language that Kraken used, they created this expectation of profits among the public. And the last limb, expectation of profit derives from the efforts of others. That was actually key, because what Kraken did, they went beyond just providing technical validation services the way that Kiln does, or the way that the Consensys staking offering works. What Kraken did was that they exercised discretion, they exercised more managerial and entrepreneurial efforts. And so through this, they were able to influence sort of the amount of rewards, and also the way that the rewards were distributed, because they didn't just pass on whatever was generated by the protocol. They just collected it and they sent a portion of it to the customers, a portion they kept for themselves, but they had a more active role than just what, for example, Kiln does.
Yeah, thank you, Nathalie. Just maybe one question. It's more like a simple question, but I know that everybody, all staking providers, will probably get their own legal opinions about that. But yeah, I've heard a lot of in the markets, I've read a lot about this. And do you think that if somebody just say, we are not custodial, so we are not receiving the ownership of the digital assets from the user, is this sufficient just to say that we are not security, or we should have more elaborated research about that, and making sure that all these four prongs are actually satisfied in order to get rid of any risks?
Yeah, so being non-custodial helps, definitely. It reduces the risk, but it doesn't eliminate it entirely. It helps in that customers would be able to withdraw their funds. They will still be able to send the exit message once withdrawals are enabled. So in the case of insolvency of the provider, they wouldn't have an exposure against the provider, but they would still be able to get their assets back. So that's different from Kraken. But what ultimately matters is what you do with the fund. So if you are non-custodial but still have a more active role, for example, promising some minimum returns, and then and instead of just passing on the rewards to the customers, then you are still at risk of your offering being a secret. So the key aspect is whether you exercise discretion or whether you just perform the more technical administrative duties of validating.
Exactly. Yeah, this is what I thought. So, Hubert, is there any reactions in Europe, in France? So what's happening in the US, especially regarding Kraken, or it's pretty much silent?
Not specifically, and I think one of the main reasons is due to the fact that it does exist a regulation in France and tomorrow in the EU with the MiCA 1, as it is not the case in the US. Again, it is very important for the SEC or any other regulator. They don't have any reference. The only reference that they do have is the security regulation. They don't have, as us, the possibility to refer to a specific regulation on digital assets. This is the main difference. This is why the question, I come back a little on the discussion with Nathalie. The discussion whether or not it is a security has no sense here. The discussion whether or not is it a digital asset regulated activity, and more specifically, the custody activity.
Exactly.
Because if you look about the various activities in the MiCA 1, clearly it is not a crypto exchange, clearly it is not a buy and sell on behalf of a third party. The only possibility to be regulated as digital assets in such case is the custody. Who controls the key? And we come back to the concept of control. And to respond to your question, not specifically, except in France, if I may, with the new amendment in the French regulation to increase the requirements from the French CASP, the French Crypto Asset Service Provider, the so-called PSAN. You have maybe seen the French Parliament. To be short, there is in France today two possibilities: a registration or a full license. Full license is more or less like a broker-dealer license, when a registration was or is quite easy to obtain because it is only focusing on EIML. And after this amendment to the French Parliament, the idea is to have the same level of requirements with a full license, but except, which is important, except the capital ratio and all the capital requirements. But for the rest, it will be the same. And this is the answer of the FTX, which has no sense, by the way, because it will not avoid the risk of fraud. But this is the political answer to say to the public, yes, we did it.
Exactly. So yeah, I mean, so come to the conclusions. Of course, you can all ask questions. So we'll have the set of different questions that you might have. So what I understand from this discussion is that staking, I mean native staking, you have a little bit less risks to be considered as a security for the reason that we have mentioned. We have to differentiate this from the specific earned products, but we need to be careful. So this is what I understood from this. Thank you very much for this part. So anyone, if you have any questions, we'll be glad to respond. Alex?
Do you guys have any insight into like Lara and the other regions, like Hong Kong?
We don't have. Yeah, sorry. Go ahead.
Can you repeat the
Yeah,
question?
yeah. Please, can you please repeat the question? Sorry. Yeah. Okay, I can repeat it. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, I can repeat it. Sorry. So the question is whether we have any opinions about Hong Kong, Asia or APAC. Yeah. Unfortunately, we have just legal qualified lawyers for France, Europe, and UK and US. For the moment, we didn't touch this subject, but it will certainly be part of our interest, of course. Yeah.
Just a general question, why is there so much interest in staking? It's a technical evolution. Why I feel like everything is staking in the last 18 months.
Why there is interest in staking?
Like a lot of,
But probably because of this regulation, probably because firstly, when you have, I don't know if you agree with me, when you don't have a specific legislation who will manage this, and then you have like the CC settlement, SEC settlement, probably everybody's just panicking. So it's just as simple as that, I think. And probably there is not a lot of things written about staking. Just Hubert explained.
Regulator, they don't like to see an activity to the public, to the retail, when there is no one in the box. They want to put people in one box, whatever the box is. If it is commodities, if it is securities, if it is digital assets, if you provide an activity to the public, even though the public is professional, but not institutional, but professional, and specifically if it is a pure retail client, yes, they cannot accept that there is a lot of activities out the scope of out the regulation.
Yeah, especially if you market it as an investment for them. So
with reward.
I think we need to be as an industry very careful about the language that we use, the terminology. The US Proof of Stake Alliance has published some industry guidelines a few weeks ago on how to talk about staking, so I would encourage everyone to follow that. Basically, we should avoid using any financial terms like yield. My colleague Bill Hughes in the US, he said that he will beat over the head anyone who uses the term yield in the staking context. It's quite effective. You should introduce the same policy at Kiln. And it's really about being clear about what staking is with the customers. So if you talk about it as an investment, then you're actually mischaracterizing what staking is. You're misrepresenting to the users, and also you're doing a disservice to your company because it can really come back to bite you later. For example, there was another SEC case earlier against Library, where basically the library project describe or talk about their tokens in their adverts and promotions in terms of the tokens will go up in value instead of focusing on the utility of the tokens. And then it's very easy for the SEC to then come and point to those adverts and say that this created expectations among the public that this is actually an investment and that they will get profits from it.
Yeah, just remind me of one question. So there is a recent lawsuit. There is an attorney general in the U.S. Who emphasized that Ethereum is a security. How? I mean, it's not, of course it's not a decision. She just emphasize in the lawsuit that Ethereum is a security. How can this actually be consequential for the staking providers, because the Ethereum it's in the heart of our business.
So not consequential. First of all, the New York Attorney General, it was just like a side comment in a broader case that also talk about Terra Luna and other tokens, and it doesn't set the law, doesn't set precedents. Okay. It's not even the SEC who said that. It's just the New York Attorney General, and we've heard like various comments about ETH being security over the years quite a lot, and
So do you agree with me just to say please don't panic?
Yeah, please don't panic. And we at Consensys certainly keep going, keep building.
Great, thank you. This is reassuring. Yeah. Go, Julien.
So we understand that we have guidelines in the European Union, and we have the enforcement law from the SEC in the US. 3 years ago, we had some spreadsheets that was provided by the SEC in order to run tests on tokens in order to understand if they were securities or utility tokens. Do you think that the SEC, in order to provide some standards to the market and guidelines, are going to do this? Run the same process in providing some tests for people to just to qualify the service they are providing to their clients? Is it a security solution, so asset management, or technology service?
Yeah, we would like to see that. I think that's what the industry has been asking for a long time. In terms of how likely that is, hard to say under the current chair, Gary Gensler. Like we've said, the path they've chosen so far was regulation by enforcement. If they wanted to issue some guidelines, they've had a chance to do that. So I think for now the industry just needs to learn some lessons from the past enforcement actions, but ultimately we need to realize that each enforcement action is really tied to the specifics. So. And also, it's important to say that Kraken didn't actually accept liability. They just decided to settle because they didn't want to fight. It made business sense for them. Businesses settle cases all the time just because it's easier and it's a business decision. So we can learn some lessons, but shouldn't panic again. Yeah. But we would like to see guidelines, of course.
And one question. Sorry, just quickly. That's a bit of my next question. Is like, regarding what happened to Kraken and an exchange that is offering staking in the US, what do you think will happen to other exchanges, large exchanges that are offering staking in the US? What should be their behavior? And do you think just changing the wording and taking the POSA Proof of Stake Alliance kind of guidance would be enough?
Yeah. So for example, Coinbase, a few days after the Kraken settlement was out, they published a clear statement differentiating their offering from Kraken's and saying that their offering isn't security, for example, because the ownership of the asset stays with the customer. Even though Coinbase has a custodial service, the ownership is still with the customer, so the customer isn't taking a counterparty risk against the exchange. But to the extent that there are some other offerings that are very similar to Kraken's that have those specific design features that made it an easy target, then they should probably change some of those features. But otherwise, Coinbase continues to offer their program. It again depends on how similar other offerings are to Kraken's.
Thank you, Nathalie. Any other questions? Yeah, okay, perfect. I'm surprised that I don't have questions from Alex Metz.
Yeah,
But,
I have plenty.
Oh, plenty.
But I'm just trying to think how to formulate them well. Because
Can you take a mic?
yeah, so I guess my primary question would be, it seems like the wording is a big thing, and it's also about the investments, right? Because we also encounter a lot that the term staking is used in many different ways by many different types of crypto businesses, but it all comes down to guaranteeing or promising some type of yield to a retail audience. And I guess my question is, do you think that the hard take on the SEC of doing case by case rather than writing legislation might also have to do with the fact that they think this is unacceptable, we need to jump on this, rather than really distinguishing what's happening behind the scenes with all of these different individual companies? Do you think that that might be a large reason why this is so aggressive towards protocol staking specifically, because there might be a misuse of terms there?
Yeah, I think the terminology is important. And also we should clearly distinguish between like different staking models, so custodial, non-custodial, solo staking. Yeah, the SEC has chosen, in Kraken's case, to go after something that in my view probably most resembles a security, but other staking programs are different, so we need to be clear about the differences and yeah, just look at the specifics.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, maybe one small question after that. So if you we also see
Last one.
yeah, last one.
Okay, last one, yeah. Yeah, thank you.
So we see a lot of centralized exchanges also launching non-custodial wallets on the side. If they were to channel all of their protocol staking activities through the non-custodial wallets, would that be a potential route that would be deemed acceptable, since there's no real asset management or counterparty risk?
Yeah, so the non-custody would sort of reduce some of the risks, yeah, like you said, the counterpart risk, but still depends what kind of services the provider provides. If it's just pure validation, just the technical service that Kiln, for example, does, or Consensys staking, and then whatever fees and rewards are generated are passed directly to the non-custodial wallet, then that's safe. And I'm not sure whether from a product perspective that would be possible to have non-custodial offering, but at the same time more active management of rewards or promising some minimum rewards. So far I haven't seen any offerings like this, but potentially in theory that's possible, and in that case, to the extent that there will be more discretion, more managerial involvement, then that puts you at risk.
Thank you very much, Nathalie. I'm really grateful to have you here today. It's a great honor for me and also for Kiln. So thank you very much, and thank you for having us.